where the door is always open and the welcome mat is out. Riding home on the 3rd Avenue bus, sitting anxiously on the very edge of the seat she had captured, Mildred made rapid calculations for the 100th time that day. Her sister Edith was arriving from Cleveland at 6:10 at Penn Station. It was already 5:22, later than she had anticipated, because some letters Mr. Sweeney wanted sent out at the last minute had delayed her at the office. She would have only about 22 minutes at home to straighten anything that might have gotten unstraightened since last night's cleaning, lay the table and organize their delicatessen supper, and fix her face a bit before she left for Penn Station. It was lucky she'd done the marketing in her lunch hour. All the last half of the afternoon, though, she had watched the dark spot on the grocery bag grow bigger. The dill pickles leaking, and she'd been too busy at the office to drag all the things out and rearrange them. Now, with her firm, square hand over the wet place, she felt better. The bus swayed to a stop, and she twisted and ducked her head to see a street marker. Only 36th Street. Dill pickles, pumpernickel bread, roll mops. Maybe it was the roll mops leaking, not the pickles. Liverwurst, salami, celery, and garlic for the potato salad, coffee ring for dessert, and oranges for breakfast tomorrow. She'd found some gladiolas in her lunch hour, too, and their blossoms still looked as fresh as when she'd bought them. It seemed like everything, but she knew better than to think there wouldn't be something at the last minute she'd forgotten. Edith's telegram last evening had taken her completely by surprise, but Mildred had just pitched in and cleaned everything, spent all evening and early this morning at it, washing windows, cleaning out closets, as well as the usual dusting and sweeping and scouring. Her sister Edith was such a neat housekeeper herself, Mildred knew she would have to have things in apple pie order if her sister was to take a good report back to their Cleveland relations. Well, at least none of the folks in Cleveland could say she'd lost her hospitality because she'd become a New Yorker. The welcome mat is always out. Mildred had written many a time to friends and members of the family who showed any signs of coming to New York. Her guests were treated to a home-cooked meal, though she did depend on the delicatessen quite a bit, she supposed, and to every comfort she could offer for as long as they cared to stay. Edith probably wouldn't stay more than 2 or 3 days, though. She was just passing through on her way to Ithaca to visit her son Arthur and his wife. She got off at 26th Street. 5:27, said a clock in a hardware store window. She certainly would have to rush. Well, wasn't she always rushing? A lot Edith, with nothing but a household to manage, knew of a life as busy as hers. Mildred's apartment house was a 6-story red brick building on 3rd Avenue over a delicatessen. The delicatessen's crowded window prompted her to go over everything again. The coleslaw, and milk, of course. How could she have forgotten? There were 2 women ahead of her, their shopping bags full of empty bottles, and they chatted with Mr. Weintraub and had their items charged in the notebook he kept hanging by the cash register. Mildred shifted and trembled inwardly with impatience and frustration, regretted that neighborliness had such a price these days, but her tense smile was a pleasant one. "Coleslaw and milk," repeated Mr. Weintraub. "Anything else?" "No, that's all, thank you," Mildred said quickly, not wanting to delay the woman who had come in after her. Some children playing tag on the sidewalk deliberately dragged an ash can into her path, but Mildred ignored them and fumbled for her keys. Necessity had taught her the trick of pushing the key with a thumb as she turned the knob with the same hand, a method she used even on those rare occasions when both arms were not full. She saw mail in her box, but she could get it later. No, it might be something from Edith. It was a beauty parlor advertisement and a postcard about a new dry cleaning process for rugs. "Plumber's upstairs, Miss Stratton," said the superintendent, who was on his way down. "Oh? What's happened?" "Nothing much. Woman above had her bowl run over. and the plumber thinks the trouble might be in your place." "But I haven't—" It was quicker to suffer accusation, however, so she plodded up the stairs. The door of her apartment was ajar. She went into a narrow room whose two close-set windows looked out on the avenue. Crossing her room, she felt a lift of pride at the unaccustomed orderliness of everything. On the coffee table lay the single careless touch, a program of the performance of Hansel and Gretel she had attended last Christmas in Brooklyn. She'd found it in cleaning the bookcase and had put it out for Edith to see. But the sight of the bathroom made her gasp. There were black smudges on everything, even on the frame of the mirror over the basin. What didn't plumbers and superintendents manage to touch, and weren't their hands always black? "All fixed, ma'am? Here's what the trouble was." The plumber held up something barely recognizable as a toothbrush and smiled. "Remember it?" "No, I don't," she said, letting her parcels slide onto a kitchen chair. It wasn't her toothbrush, she was sure of that. But the less talk about it, the sooner he would leave. While she waited to get at the bathroom, she spread her best tablecloth on the gate-legged table in the kitchen, pulled the window shade down so the people in the kitchen 3 feet away across the air chute couldn't see in, then dashed the morning coffee grounds into the garbage pail and stuck the dirty coffee pot into the sink. Keeping one foot on the pedal of the garbage pail, she pivoted in 6 directions, reached even the bag of groceries on the chair and began to unload it. The closing of the door told her the plumber was gone, and crushing the last paper bag into the garbage— she generally saved them for old Sam, the greengrocer, but there was no time now— she went into the bathroom and erased every black fingerprint with rag and scouring powder and mopped up the floor as she backed her way out. In the minute she allowed for the floor to dry, she pushed off her medium-heeled Oxfords at the closet door and stepped into identical, newer Oxfords. But their laces were tied from a hasty removal, too. She stooped down and felt a dart over her bent knee. A run. She mustn't forget to change the stocking before she left for the station. Or had she another good stocking? Buying stockings was one of the errands she had intended to do today in her lunch hour. 21 minutes of 6, she saw as she trotted into the bathroom. 11 minutes before she ought to leave the house. Even after the brisk scrubbing with a wash rag, her squarish face looked as colorless as her short jacket of black and gray tweed. Her hair, of which the gray had recently gotten an edge over the brown, was naturally wavy, and now the more wiry gray hairs stood out from her head, making her look entirely gray, unfortunately, and giving her an air of harassed untidiness no matter what she did to correct it. But her eyes made up for the dullness of the rest of her face, she thought. Her round but rather small gray eyes still looked honest and kind, though sometimes there was a bewildered, almost frightened expression in them that shocked her. She saw it now. It was because she was hurrying so, she supposed. She must remember to look calm with Edith. Edith was so calm. She daubed a spot of rouge on one cheek and was spreading it outward with timid strokes when the peal of the doorbell made her jump. "Miss?" said a frail voice in the semi-darkness of the hall. "Take a 10-cent chance on St. Anthony's School Lottery Saturday, May 22nd. No, child, I haven't time," Mildred said, closing the door. She hated to be harsh with the little tykes, but it's 17 minutes of 6. As a matter of fact, the alarm clock shouldn't be out on the coffee table, she thought. It looked too much as if she slept on the living room couch, which of course she did. She put the clock in a bureau drawer. For a moment, she stood in the center of the room with her mind a complete blank. What should she do next? Why was her heart beating so fast? One would think she'd been running, or at least that she was terribly excited about something, and she wasn't, really. Maybe a bit of whiskey would help. Her father had always said a little nip was good when a person was under a strain, and she was under a slight strain, she supposed. After all, she hadn't seen Edith in nearly 2 years, not since she'd been to Cleveland on her vacation 2 summers ago. Mr. Sweeney had given her the whiskey last Christmas, and she hadn't touched it since she made the eggnog Christmas Day for old Mrs. Shovlov upstairs. The bottle was still almost full. Cautiously, she poured an inch into a small glass that had once contained cheese, then added another half-inch, and drank it off at a gulp to save time. The drink landed with a warm explosion inside her. "Dear old Edith," she said aloud, and smiled with anticipation. The doorbell rang. Those children again, she thought. They always tried twice. Absently, she plucked a piece of thread from the carpet and rolled it between her thumb and forefinger, wondering if she should answer the door or not. Then the bell came again, with a rap besides, and she plunged toward it. It might be the plumber about something else. "Miss, take a 10-cent chance on the St. Anthony." "No," Mildred said with a shudder. "No, thank you, children." But she found a coin in the pocket of her jacket and thrust it at them. Then she dashed into the kitchen and set out plates, cups, and saucers, and paper napkins in buffet style. It looked nice to have everything out, and would save considerable time later. She put the big mixing bowl for the potato salad on the left, and lined up beside it in the smaller mixing bowl for the dressing, the salad oil, the vinegar, mustard, paprika, salt, and pepper, the jar of stuffed olives. A little moldy, best wash them off, in a militarily straight row. The sugar bowl was low, she noticed, and lumpy, too, and only 3 minutes left. She hacked at the lumps in the bowl with a teaspoon, but not all of them would dislodge, so finally she gave it up and just added more sugar. Some of it spilled on the floor. She seized broom and dustpan and went after it. Her heart was pounding again. What on earth ailed her? Thoughtfully, she took down the whiskey and poured another inch or two into the glass. Soothing sensations crept from her stomach in all directions, made their way even into her hands and feet. She swept up the sugar with renewed fortitude and patience and whisked the remaining grains under the sink so they wouldn't crackle underfoot. The kitchen curtains caught her eye for the first time in months, but she resolutely refused to worry about their streaks of black grit. A person was allowed one fault in a household, she thought. As she pulled on her coat, it occurred to her she hadn't boiled the eggs for the salad, and she'd meant to do it the first thing when she came home. She put 3 eggs into a saucepan of water and turned the gas on high. At least she could start them in the few moments she'd be here, and turn them off as she went out the door. Now, had she keys? Money? Her hat? She snatched up her hat, a once stiff pillbox of Persian lamb, much the same color as her hair, and pressed it on with the flat of her hand. Nice to have the kind of hats one didn't have to worry about being straight or crooked, she thought. But she allowed herself one glance in the hall mirror as she passed by, and it was enough to reveal one rouged cheek and one plain one. She hurried back into the bathroom, where the light was best. It was 6 minutes to 6 when she flew downstairs. She'd better take a taxi to the station after all. She regretted the extravagance, though she felt herself yielding to a gaiety and abandonment that had been plucking at her ever since she thought of taking a nip of whiskey. She didn't really care about 85 cents, $1 with tip. $1 was just a little more than 1/100th of her weekly salary, or a little more than 1,000th. No, then 100th, of course. Crossing the lobby of Penn Station toward the information center, she felt the run in her stocking travel upward and was afraid to look. She'd forgotten to change it. But she really wouldn't have had time to look for a good stocking, even if she'd remembered. She could tell Edith she'd gotten the run hurrying to meet her. In fact, she thought brilliantly. Edith didn't have to know she'd been home at all, which would make her house and herself, after some apologies, look very nice indeed. "Downstairs for incoming train information," the clerk told her. Mildred trotted downstairs and was referred to a blackboard, where she learned that the Cleveland flyer would be 20 minutes late. Suddenly, something collapsed in her, and she felt terribly tired. She started for a nearby bench, but she knew she was too restless to sit still. She wandered back upstairs. Her nervous system was not adjusted to waiting. She could wait in the office for Mr. Sweeney to finish a long telephone conversation and get back to whatever work they were doing together, but she could not wait on her own time, for an elevator, for a clerk in a department store, or on a line in the post office, without growing anxious and jumpy. Maybe another touch of whiskey would be a good idea, she thought. A leisurely one she could sip while she composed herself. A big, softly lighted pink and beige bar came into view almost immediately, and there were several women inside she was relieved to see. Feeling strange, and somehow very special, Mildred went in through the revolving door. Every table was in use, so she stood shyly behind two men at the bar, over whose shoulders she could see the barman now and then. "Whiskey," she said when the barman seemed to be looking at her. "What kind?" "Oh, it doesn't matter," she said cheerfully. Everybody in the place seemed to be having such a good time. It was fun just to watch them. She never gave such places a thought, yet they were going full blast all over New York every evening, she supposed. It occurred to her she was probably a more sophisticated person than she realized. She wondered if Edith still wore her hair in those stiff Marcel waves. The last time she had seen Edith, she had looked like one of those dummies with wigs they have in beauty parlor windows. That wasn't a nice thing to think about one's sister, but Edith really had looked like them. For the first time now, Mildred realized that Edith was actually coming, that she would see her within minutes. She could hear Edith's slow voice as clearly as if she stood beside her saying, "Well, that's fate, Millie," as she often did, and as she probably would say about her daughter Phyllis's marriage. Phyllis's husband was only 19 and without a job, and according to a letter Cousin John in Toledo had written her a few weeks ago, without ambition either. "Well, that's fate," Edith would say by way of passing it off. "Parents can't boss their children any more once the children think they're grown." Mildred's heart went out to her sister. The square numeraled clock on the wall said only 6:17. Just about an hour ago she had been on the bus going home. The crowded bus seemed suddenly dismal and hideous. It was as if another person had been riding on it an hour ago, not herself. Not this person who sipped whiskey in a bar where dance music played. This person who awaited a train from Cleveland. One of the men offered her a high red stool, but she was so short she decided just to lean against it. Then all at once it was 6:28. She paid her check, clutched her handbag, and dashed off. Now, really now, her sister was pulling into the station. She giggled excitedly. A bell went wang, wang, wang. A metal gate folded back. People rushed up the slope, people rushed down, among them herself. And there was Edith, walking toward her. "Edith!" "Millie!" They fell upon each other. My own flesh and blood, Mildred thought, patting Edith's back and feeling a little weepy. There was confusion for a few minutes while Edith found her suitcase. Mildred asked questions about the family, and they looked for a cab. With a flash of pain, Mildred remembered the eggs on the stove at home. They would be burning now, aflame probably. The gas was so high. How did burning eggs smell? In the taxi, Mildred braced Edith's suitcase against the jump seat with her foot and tried to listen to everything Edith was telling her. but she couldn't keep track of anything for thinking of the eggs. "How is Arthur?" Mildred asked, one eye out the window to see if the driver was going right. "Just as well as can be. He has a new baby." Mildred hoped every child in the neighborhood wasn't cluttering the front steps. Sometimes they played cards right in the doorway. "Oh, a new baby. Oh, has he?" "Yes, another little girl," said Edith. "Just last week. I was saving it to tell you. So now you're twice a grandmother. I'll have to send Arthur and Helen something right away." Edith protested she shouldn't. Mildred paid the driver, then struggled out with the suitcase, waving Edith's assistance aside, and not waiting for the driver to help because drivers usually didn't. She realized too late that she might have added another dime to the tip and hoped Edith hadn't noticed. Pinching each other's fingers under the suitcase handle, the sisters climbed the 3 flights. Mildred felt a rough corner of the suitcase tearing at her good stocking. "Are you hungry?" she asked cheerily as she felt for her keys, trying not to sound out of breath. She sniffed for burning eggs. "I had a snack on the train about 5 o'clock," Edith replied, "so I'm bearing up, as they say. Well, here it is, such as it is." Mildred smiled fearfully as she swung the door open for Edith, braced for any kind of odor. "It's just lovely," Edith said even before the light was turned on. Mildred had flown past her into the kitchen. The eggs were turned off, resting quietly in their water. She stared at them incredulously for a second or two. "It's just the one room and a bit of a kitchen this time," Mildred remarked as she returned to her sister, for Edith, standing in the middle of the room, seemed to be expecting her to show her the rest. "But it's much more convenient to the office than the Bronx apartment was. I know you'll want to wash up, Edie, so just have your coat off and I'll show you where everything is." But Edith did not want to wash up. "As Father used to say, I propose we have a wee nip in honor of the occasion," Mildred said a bit wildly, her voice rising over the roar of a passing truck on 3rd Avenue. She thought Edith looked at her in a funny way, so she added, "Not that I've become a drinking woman by any means. I did have one while I was waiting for you in the station, though. Could you tell?" "No. You mean you went in a bar by yourself and had a drink?" "Why, yes," Mildred replied, wishing now that she hadn't mentioned it. "Women often go into bars in New York, you know. It's not like Cleveland." Mildred turned a little unsteadily and went into the kitchen. She did want another bit of a drink, just to continue feeling as calm as she did now, for it certainly was helping to calm her. She took a quick nip, then fixed a tray with the bottle and glasses and ice. "Well, down the hatch," Mildred said as she set the tray down on the coffee table. Edith had refused the maroon-covered easy chair Mildred had offered her, and now she sat tensely on the couch and sipped her whiskey as if it were poison. She gazed off now and then at the windows. The curtains, Mildred admitted, were not so clean as Cleveland curtains, but at least she had brushed them down last night, and at the brown bureau that was her least attractive piece of furniture. Why didn't Edith look over at the kitchen table, where everything was lined up as neatly as a color photograph in a magazine? "The gladiolas are beautiful, Millie," Edith said, looking at the gladiolas Mildred had set in a blue vase atop the bureau. "I grow gladiolas in the backyard." Mildred lighted up appreciatively at Edith's compliment. "How long am I to have the pleasure of your company, sister?" "Oh, just till—" Edith broke off and looked at the windows with an expression of annoyance. A truck, or perhaps a cement mixer, was rattling and clanking up the avenue. Suddenly Mildred, whose ears had adjusted long ago to the street noises, realized how it must sound to Edith, and writhed with shame. She had quite forgotten the worst feature of her apartment. The noise. The garbage trucks that started grinding around 3 a.m. were going to be worse. "It's a nuisance," Mildred said carelessly, "but one gets used to it. What with the housing—" Something else was passing, backfiring like pistol shots, and Mildred realized she couldn't hear her own voice. She waited, then resumed. "What with the housing being—" But Edith silenced her with a hopeless shake of her head. A war of horns was going on now. Probably a little traffic jam at the corner. That was the way it went, Mildred tried to convey to Edith with a smile and a shrug. All at once, or nothing at all. For a few moments their ears, even Mildred's ears, were filled with the cacophony of car horns, of snarling human voices. "Really, Millie, I don't see how you stand this noise day after day," Edith said. Mildred shrugged involuntarily, started to say something and said nothing at all. She felt inexplicably foolish all at once. "What were you going to say before?" Edith prompted. "Oh, well, what with the housing being what it is today, New Yorkers can't be too picky where they live. I have my budget, and I didn't have any choice but this place and something on 10th Avenue when I wanted to move from the Bronx. Took me 3 months to find this." She said it with a little pride that was instantly quelled by her sister's troubled regard of the windows. Well, there weren't any trucks passing now, Mildred thought a bit resentfully, and the traffic jam had evidently cleared up. What was she looking at? Self-consciously, Mildred got up and lowered the window, though she knew it would not help much to lessen the noise. She looked at her geranium. The geranium was nothing but a crooked, dry stalk in its pot now, at the extreme left of the windowsill where the sun lingered longest. It must have been 3 weeks since she'd watered it, and now she felt overcome with remorse. Why was she always rushing so she forgot all about doing the nice things, all the little things that gave her real pleasure? A wave of self-pity brought tears to her eyes. A lot her sister knew about all she had to contend with, the 1,000,001 things she had to think of all by herself, not only at home, but at the office, too. You could tell just by looking at Edith. She never had to worry or rush about anything, even to take a hard-boiled egg off the stove. With a smile, Mildred turned to Edith, and under cover of a "hungry yet?" ducked into the kitchen to see about the hard-boiled eggs. She balanced the 3 hot eggs on top of the block of ice in the icebox, so they would cool as fast as possible. "Remember the time we took the raw eggs by mistake on the picnic, Edie?" Mildred said, laughing as she came back into the living room. It was an old family joke, and one or the other of them mentioned it almost every time they cooked hard-boiled eggs. "Will I ever forget?" Edith shrieked, bringing her hands down gently on her knees. "I still say Billy Reed switched them on us. He's the same rascal today he always was." "Those were happy old days, weren't they?" Mildred said vaguely, wondering if she shouldn't perhaps cook the eggs even longer. She made a start for the kitchen and changed her mind. "Millie, do you think it's really worth it to live in New York?" Edith asked suddenly. "Worth it? How do you mean, worth it? I suppose I earn fairly good money." She didn't mean to sound superior to her sister, but she was proud of her independence. "I'm able to save a little, too. I mean, it's such a hard life you lead and all, being away from the family. New York's so unfriendly and no trees to look at or anything. I think you're more nervous than you were 2 years ago." Mildred stared at her. Maybe New York had made her more nervous, quicker about things. But wasn't she as happy and healthy as Edith? "They're starting trees right here on 3rd Avenue. They're pretty small yet, but tomorrow you can see them. I don't think it's such an unfriendly town," she went on defensively. Why, just this afternoon, I heard the delicatessen man talking with a woman about... and even the plumber." She broke off, knowing she wouldn't be able to express what she meant. "Well, I don't know," Edith said, twiddling her hands limply in her lap. "My last trip here, I asked a policeman where the Radio City Music Hall was, and you'd have thought I was asking him to map me a way to the North Pole or something. He seemed so put out about it. Nobody's got time for anybody else, have they?" Her voice trailed off, and she looked at Mildred for an answer. Mildred moistened her lips. Something in her struggled slowly and painfully to the surface. I've always found our policemen very courteous. Maybe yours was a traffic officer or something. They're pretty busy, of course, but New York policemen are famous for their courtesy, especially to out-of-towners. Why, they even call them New York's finest." A tingle of civic pride swept over her. She remembered the morning she had stood in the rain at 42nd Street and Fifth Avenue and watched the companies of policemen, New York's finest, march down the avenue. And the mounted policemen? How handsome they had looked, row upon row with their horses' hoofs clattering. She had stood there not caring that she was all by herself then, or that the rain was soaking her. She felt so proud of her big city. A man with a little boy perched on his shoulder had turned around in the crowd and smiled at her, she remembered. "New York's very friendly," Mildred protested earnestly. "Well, maybe, but that's not the way it seems to me." Edith slipped off a shoe and rubbed her instep against the heel of her other foot. "And sister," she continued in a more subdued tone, "I hope you're not indulging more than you should." Mildred's eyes grew wide. "Do you mean drinking? Goodness, no. Why, at least I don't think so. I just took these in your honor, Edie. Gracious, you don't think I do this every night, do you?" "Oh, I didn't mean I thought that," Edith said, forcing a smile. Mildred chewed her underlip and wondered whether she should think of some other excuse for herself or let the matter drop. "You know, Millie, I'd meant to speak to you about maybe coming back to Cleveland to live. Everybody's talking about the interesting new jobs opening up there, and you're not, well, so deep fixed in this job that you couldn't leave, are you?" "Of course I could leave if I wanted to, but Mr. Sweeney depends a great deal on me. At least, he says he does." She swallowed and tried to collect all that clamored inside her for utterance. "It's not a very big job, I suppose, but it's a good one, and we've all been working together for 7 years, you know," she asserted, but she knew this by itself couldn't express to Edith how the 4 of them— she had written Edith many a time about Louise, who handled the books and the files, and Carl, their salesman, and Mr. Sweeney, of course— were much more of a family than many families were. "Oh, New York's my home now, Edie." "You've always got a home with us, Millie." Mildred was about to say that was very sweet of her, but a truck's brakes were mounting to a piercing crescendo outside. She dropped her eyes from Edith's disappointed face. "I've got some things I ought to put on hangers overnight," Edith said finally. "And do you mind if I wash my white gloves? They'll just about dry by morning. I'll have to leave early." "What time?" Mildred asked, in order to be cooperative, but aware that her worried expression might make her seem eager for Edith's departure. She smiled, which was almost worse. "The train's at 8:48, Edith replied, going to her suitcase. "That's too bad. I'm sorry you're not staying longer, Edith." She really did feel sorry. They'd hardly have time to talk at all. And Edith probably wouldn't notice half the things she had done around the house. The neat closets, the half of the top drawer she had cleared for her in the bureau. the container of soft drinks Edith liked that she had thought of the very first thing last evening. Mildred wiped the back of her hand across her eyes and went into the kitchen. She got the stew pan of boiled potatoes from the icebox and dumped them into the salad bowl. She separated the celery under running water, bunched it, and sliced it onto the potatoes. The old habit of rushing, of saving split seconds, caught her up in its machinery as if she no longer possessed a volition of her own, and she surrendered to it with a kind of tortured enjoyment. She hardly breathed except to gasp at intervals, and she moved faster and faster. The jar of olives flew into the bowl at one burst, followed by a shower of onion chips and a cloud of paprika that made her cough. Finally, she seized knife and fork and began to slice everything in the bowl every which way. Her muscles grew so taut it hurt her even to move to the icebox to get the eggs. The eggs had descended 3 inches or more into the ice, and she could not extract them with her longest fingers. She peered at their murkily enlarged forms through the ice cake, then burst out laughing. "Edie," she cried. "Edie, come here and look." But her only reply was the flushing of the toilet. Mildred bent over in silent paroxysmic hilarity. If her sister only knew about the toilet, the toothbrush the plumber had dragged out that hadn't even looked like a toothbrush. Mildred straightened and grimly wrestled the ice cake from the box. She shook the eggs into the sink, holding the ice with hands and forearms. The eggs had bright, gooey orange centers, but they were fairly cold. She hacked them into the salad, listening the while for Edith's coming out of the bathroom. She was racing to have the supper ready when Edith came out. But what did it matter, really, whether she was ready or not? Why was she in such a hurry? She giggled at herself then, with her mouth still smiling, set her teeth, and stirred the dressing so fast it rose high up the sides of the mixing bowl. "Can I help you, Millie?" "Not a thing to do, thank you, Edie." Mildred dragged the coleslaw out of the icebox so hastily she dropped it face down on the floor, but Edith had just turned away and didn't see. Within moments, she was ready. The table laid, the coffee perking, the pumpernickel bread. But there wasn't any butter. She'd forgotten butter for herself yesterday, and forgotten it again today. "There isn't any butter," Mildred said in an agony of apology as Edith took her place at the table. She thought of running down for some, but felt it would be rude to make Edith wait. "It's the same old-fashioned potato salad Mama used to make at home, though. It looks delicious. Don't you ever have hot meals here at home?" "Why, most of the time. I try to eat a very balanced diet." She knew what her sister was thinking now, that she lived off delicatessen sandwiches, probably. She passed Edith the coleslaw. "Here's something very healthful, if you like." Her throat closed up. She felt ready to cry again. "I'm sorry, Edie. I suppose you'd have preferred a hot meal." "No, this tastes very nice. Now don't you worry," Edith said, poking at the potato salad. At the end of the supper, Mildred realized she had not put out the dill pickles, or the roll mops. "Would you like to step out tonight? Take a look at the big city?" Mildred came in from the kitchen, where she had just finished cleaning up. Edith was lying on the couch. "Well, maybe. I don't think I can nap after all, with all the traffic going. I suppose it lets up at night, though." "There's a nice movie a few blocks uptown within walking distance," Mildred said, feeling a sink of defeat. How would she ever break it to Edith that there was some kind of noise on 3rd Avenue all night long? They went to a shabby little movie house on 34th Street, whose gay lights Edith had seen and fixed upon. "Is this your neighborhood theater?" Edith asked. "Oh, no, there's any number of better theaters around," Mildred answered rather shortly. Edith had chosen the place. She almost wished Edith had wanted to go up to Broadway. She'd have spent more money, but at least the theater would have been nicer, and Edith couldn't have complained. Mildred was so tired, She dozed during some of the picture. That night, Mildred was aware that Edith got out of bed several times, to get glasses of water or to stand by the window. Mildred suggested that Edith get some cotton from the medicine cabinet to put in her ears. But Mildred slept so hard herself, even on the too-short sofa. Most of her impressions might have come from a great distance. "Are they mixing cement at this hour?" Edith asked. "No, that's our garbage disposal, I'm afraid," Mildred said with an automatic little smile, though it was too dark for Edith to see her. She had dreaded this, the clatter of ash cans, the uninterrupted moaning of machinery chewing up cans, bottles, cartons, and anything else that was dumped into the truck's open rear. Mildred bared her set teeth and tried to estimate just how awful it sounded to her sister. The clank of bottles now, the metallic bump of an emptied ash can carelessly dropped on the sidewalk, and under it all the relentless rrr, 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 rrr. Quite bad, she decided, and quite ugly if one wasn't used to it. "They have their job to do," Mildred added. "I don't know what a big city like this would do without them." "Looks to me like they could do it in the daytime when nobody's trying to sleep," said Edith. "What?" Edith repeated it more loudly. "I don't see how you stand it, even with the cotton in your ears." "I don't use cotton anymore," Mildred murmured. Mildred did not feel too wide awake the next morning, and Edith said she hadn't slept all night and was dead tired, so neither said very much. At the core of Mildred's silence was both her ignominy at having failed as a hostess and a desire not to waste a second. For despite having gotten up early, they were a bit pressed to get off when they should. At 8 o'clock sharp, the pneumatic drill burst out like a fanfare of machine guns. A big apartment house was going up directly across the street. Edith just glanced at Mildred and shook her head. But around 8:15, there was an explosion across the street that made Edith jump and drop something she had in her hands. Mildred smiled. "They have to blast some. New York has rock foundations, you know. You'd be surprised how fast they build things, though." Edith's suitcase was not closed for the last time until 8:27, and they arrived at the station with no time to spare. "I hope you can manage a longer visit on your return trip, Edith," Mildred said. "Well, Arthur did say something about going back to Cleveland with me for a while, but we'll let you know. I can't thank you enough for a lovely time, Millie." A pressed hand, a brushed cheek, and that was all. Mildred watched the train doors close down the platform, but she had no time to watch the train pull out. What time was it? 8:49 on the dot, her wristwatch said. If she hurried, she might be at the office by 9 as usual. Of course, Mr. Sweeney wouldn't mind her being late on such a special morning, but for that very reason, she thought it would be nice to be prompt. She darted to the corner of 7th Avenue and 34th Street and caught the crosstown bus. She could catch the 3rd Avenue bus uptown and be at the office on 2nd Avenue in no time. At the 3rd Avenue bus stop, an anxious frown came on her face as she estimated the speed and distance of an oncoming truck, then ran. She mustn't forget to buy stockings today during her lunch hour, she thought. And tonight, she ought to drop a note to Edith in Ithaca, telling her how she had enjoyed her stay and inviting her again when she could make it. And a note to Arthur, of course, about the new baby. Maybe Edith and Arthur could both stay with her a while, if they went back to Cleveland together. She'd be able to make them comfortable somehow.